Quinn's life has taken a dramatic turn, and he's struggling to adapt. Can Layla help him find a solution to his sunlight weakness?
After finishing his intense battle with Nate, his hour using the VR capsule was up, and Quinn was no longer able to participate in any more matches. Although he had lost his match, he felt satisfied. He had learnt a lot during his battle with Nate. His attacks, including his blood swipe, were not strong enough to do any damage to Nate while he was using his metal ability. However, his hammer strike skill was. Hammer strike didn't increase his strength, but now Quinn had a good idea what it did do. It was an attack that focused on the inside, an internal attack, the perfect counter to those whose abilities who hardened or transformed their bodies. Quinn couldn't wait to find out what the other tutorials the blonde man had in store for him, but he had no idea how to unlock them. The blonde man had simply said when he was ready, they would unlock for him. There were two things this meant. One might be when Quinn's stats were high enough to complete the fighting skills requirements, or when Quinn was a high enough level. The second lesson the fight had taught him was how important stamina was. The flash step was an incredible skill that allowed him to avoid a strike in an instant, but if he used it more than twice, then he would be done for, and if he was out in the sun, he wasn't even sure he would be able to use the skill at all. This made Quinn think long and hard about what to put his stat points into in the future. Perhaps going for an agility or strength-based character wasn't the best thing after all. With that in mind, Quinn had set up an important meeting with Layla today. There was one thing he needed to learn about more than anything, especially if he wanted to get stronger in the future. It was a Sunday, so Quinn still had the rest of the day off, before having to go back to the standard military lessons for a week. The sun was out bright and early, and Quinn was standing outside the school gates, patiently waiting for Layla. "This damn sun," Quinn said while his body was covered in sweat. All current stats had been halved. Ever since he had evolved from a human into a halfling, the sun seemed to bother him even more. He was covered in sweat, even though it wasn't that hot, and he was starting to have ringing headaches if he stayed outside too long. Finally, after waiting a while, Layla arrived. "You ready?" The two of them walked out of the school's premise and carried on walking until they eventually reached a nice quiet park. There were some students outside messing around, playing with their abilities, and at the same time there was some military personnel relaxing on the benches. "Peaceful, isn't it?" Layla said. "Yeah, it's kind of nice." Then a thought came into his head, of all the news he had heard on TV, about what life was like during the war, how it could start up again any second, and finally, the death of his parents. "But who knows how long it will last. That's why I need to keep getting stronger." Layla placed the heavy bag on the ground, and it seemed like it was a weight off her shoulders. Even if she was using her ability, it would be tiring for someone to keep it up on the whole walk here. That's when Layla started to empty out all the contents in her bag. There were all sorts of things inside. There were several items of thick clothing such as hats, scarves, sunglasses, and most of it seemed to be black in color. Then she continued to pull out even more stuff, lotions and lotions of sun cream, and finally she pulled out an umbrella. "Did it cost a lot?" Quinn asked, worried after seeing how much she had bought. "Don't worry about it. My family sent me the credits, and I used up what the academy gave me," Layla replied. "Besides, I got it all from the marketplace, so it was dirt cheap." The marketplace was an online store that was used all around the world. It sold your everyday items such as food, clothes, utilities, and other things. With the use of teleporters, your items were able to be shipped to you in almost an instant, as long as you could afford one of these. If not, you would have to go to a collection point. And the military school had one of these collection points for students to use. But other than just your everyday items, the marketplace was also used by people to sell and buy beast weapons, skill books, ability books, and all sorts of things that would be beneficial to you in battles. However, to access this part of the marketplace, you would need either military personal ID, which all students got a temporary one to use during their time there, or if you were a traveler. Travelers were people who didn't work for the military, but worked for a private company and often went into portals to explore different worlds. "So, what do you want to try first?" Layla said. The whole purpose of today was to find out if there was any way to either reduce the effect that the sun had on the system, or even temporarily stop it altogether, and there was no one better than Layla for the job. She knew everything about vampires, having grown up reading about them. She ordered whatever she thought might have been effective. Quinn looked at all the items that she had brought over. He then noticed a few more things on the ground with her. There was a metal-shaped cross, a clove of garlic, and even a piece of silver jewelry. "Oh, those are for later," Layla said, embarrassed, noticing Quinn staring at her stuff. "We should also try to find out if you have any other weaknesses of normal vampires as well." "All right, why don't we just try the umbrella first?" Quinn said as he knelt down to pick it up. He then stood still and popped open the umbrella. It was solid black in color to make sure that most of the light didn't penetrate or get through it. Quinn then adjusted the umbrella a few times to make sure his body was completely covered in the shadow. Then, to his surprise, stats have returned to normal. While Quinn was fully covered under the shade, his stats had returned. Then he lifted his hand and placed it outside the shade zone ever so slightly, and as soon as the tiniest part of his finger was outside, the same usual status screen had appeared. "You are being affected by direct sunlight. All stats will be halved." "Well?" Layla asked. "It works, but even if a little bit of my body is in the sun, then I start to feel weak." This wouldn't do. Holding the umbrella, although would return his stats, it would be difficult to use in a fight. One hand would be occupied holding the umbrella, while the other would be free. Also, it was a big, weak target that the enemy could easily destroy. But at last he found out that if he just carried an umbrella with him, he would no longer feel weak. It was a good idea to keep one on him for now. "That's a special umbrella," Layla said. "It's one used to block out the UV from the sun. Although at most it can block out about 90%, it's not perfect. To be honest, I'm surprised it worked." "Is the UV rays why I feel weak then?" "Not necessarily. I mean, vampire lore is all over the place, but these myths had to be grounded somewhere, right?" Layla then looked at the ground and picked up the sun cream. "If the umbrella really worked because of the UV, then some sun cream should have some effect." Layla then walked up to Quinn, squirting some of the cream onto her hand. "You ready?" Quinn then went a little red, thinking about Layla applying the cream onto his body. He realized that she was kind of cute. So she was a little strange and knew too much about vampires. Everyone had their geeky thing they knew about and was obsessed with. Then Quinn felt something cold on his leg. She had taken Quinn's silence as a yes and started to slather the cream all over his body. After making sure everywhere she could see covered in cream, to finish it off, she placed sunglasses over Quinn's eyes. "Although we can stop the UV on your eyelids, we can't on your eyeballs," Layla said. "Well, anything?" This time there was no such result. When opening up his status, the UV cream hadn't even made a little bit of impact. Quinn still felt incredibly weak, and his stats were still halved. "So it looks like it's not to do with the UV then. Although the umbrella worked, it can only block so much of the UV, and same with the cream. So I was hoping it would have some effect, but this means it's most likely some other property in the sun that we don't know about." To be honest, Quinn was thankful that the sun cream didn't work. The idea of waking up every day and doing it as a daily routine, at some point the cream would wear off too. He also couldn't imagine in the middle of the fight asking his opponent to wait to lather and cream himself all over. He had pictures in his head of asking Vorden to cover for him while he brought out a bottle of sun cream. Finally, it was time for the last test. This one Quinn was dreading the most, the clothes test. He was already sweating and feeling hot as it was, and couldn't imagine putting on a load of black clothing. But he thought it was best to get it over and done with as soon as possible. First, Quinn placed a sweater over the top of his body, then a pair of black thick trousers on his feet. Instead of trainers, he changed to black boots. Then on his hand, a pair of leather black gloves. Finally, on his head, he had a large back top hat. Looking at him, Layla could barely hold in her laughter. He looked absolutely ridiculous. Breathe, Layla," she mumbled. "Well, anything?" "No, not yet anyway." "Well, we might as well try the rest." Layla then continued to place clothes onto Quinn. This time she had covered his face with a balaclava, and even where his eyes were, she had put a sleeping mask on. More hats were placed on, and now every inch of his skin was covered. "Anything?" "No!" Quinn shouted, but it sounded muffled through the clothes. However, Layla didn't give up yet. She felt like if the umbrella had worked, then this had to work as well. She continued to place all the remaining clothes she had brought with, and then finally, while Layla was piling on the clothes, Quinn managed to shout something. "Wait, it's working!" Quinn said. Although the clothes had worked, Quinn was around 3 inches thick in black clothing. Layla quickly helped Quinn take off all the clothing, as it seemed like he was a bit wobbly on his legs and was going to pass out any second now. Once the two of them were finished, Quinn opened up the umbrella and the energy started to restore back into his body again. The two of them sat down on the clean-cut grass and were discussing the results of the test. "Well, you can't go out like that," Layla said. "You couldn't move in that thing." "Agreed, but at least we know that the most important thing is to stop the sun hitting me." Quinn started to feel the umbrella, wondering if perhaps he could get clothes made out of the same material. Then the problem would be the material would be too weak. Most likely the reason the clothes didn't work so well was because they didn't block out the sun enough. He needed more solid but flexible material. There was some stuff out there that might have worked, like a black latex suit or something, but these weren't strong enough for fighting. It could easily be torn or ripped, and then he would be back to being normal, weak Quinn again. Suddenly, a thought had entered Quinn's mind. He started to remember the fight he had inside the VR game. When he had gone against Sam, he had used a cape that was able to block his blood swipe. The material was not only flexible, but strong as well. The cape was most likely made from some type of beast from one of the portals. If Quinn couldn't get enough of this material, maybe he could make a suit of some kind that could not only protect him from the sun, but also be strong enough to be used in combat. A smile started to appear on his face. He now couldn't wait to be transported to hunt some beasts.
Will Quinn be able to track down the materials he needs to create a protective suit? And what obstacles will he face along the way? Find out in the next episode.
Subscribe to the Pocket FM Fantasy YouTube channel and press the bell icon for instant notifications. Check out our channel for more exciting shows.